In a world of technology, sometimes you need to go back in time and remember what we used to have and recognize what we take for granted today. I have a person who has came across some diaries from 1709 during a heavy slavery drought. I want to review this because this slavery and human trafficking still happens today. These journal entries, I think, are very important to the literature. Well, I actually came across 3 separate people. One was from an abolitionist, which they kind of supported the Underground Railroad, basically. One was from a slave, and one was from a plantation owner. Sad that it's taken this long for them to turn up. I think that what happened and how, some of these people act, it's terrible. They had terrible lives. Well, today it's not really slavery, it's more human trafficking, which basically women and men, but more so women, are taken from their homes, from the street, and they're taken to these strange places and basically sold for their body. Terrible. And it's a scary thought to think that it could happen to anyone. To prove my point about what these people had to go through, starting with the little slave girl, of course. I would love to read you a diary excerpt from the little girl, just to kind of give you a feel of what she went through daily. She's 15 years old, and what her master does to her is terrible and demeaning, and it's one of those stop and think, what if this was you or your daughter or your sister? But now I entered on my 15th year. My master began to whisper foul words in my ear, and young as I was, I could not remain ignorant of their importance. I tried to treat them with indifference or contempt. The difference between my master's age and my extreme youth, and the fear that his conduct would be reported to my grandmother, made me bear this treatment for many months. So, just there, she put up with him sexually harassing her for months because she was afraid that her grandmother was gonna find out. He was a crafty man and resorted to many means to accomplish his purposes. Many means to accomplish his purposes? I feel horrible for this girl. I don't know what she went through, but this is what really gets me going. Sometimes he had stormy, horrific ways that made his victims tremble. Sometimes he assumed a gentleness that he thought must surely subdue. Of the two, I preferred his stormy moods. Although they left me trembling, he tried his utmost to corrupt the pure principles my grandmother had instilled. He filled my mind with unclean images such as only a vile monster could think of. I turned from him with disgust and hatred. This girl preferred her master's rude, stormy, horrific moods, where he probably beat her until she was on the verge of death and trembling and trying to stay alive, versus when he was nice. But honestly, if you think about it, he filled my young mind with unclean images. he mentally raped her. He degraded her, made her nothing. And I'm sure he wasn't the only one that did it. What made me feel for her the most, and honestly made me tremble, was the part in the last paragraph when the girl talks about she couldn't turn anywhere for protection, and in either case there was no law to protect her. And that's kind of where we take everything for granted nowadays, that there are laws to protect us from things like this. Back then, it was okay. He owned her. And that's terrible. But, and it says down here, if you credited one half the truths that are told to you concerning the helpless millions suffering in this cruel bondage, here she is being beat, probably to death, raped, and she feels sorry for the other people, not herself, other people. And that's truly inspiring. Next, I would like to go and discuss with you the abolitionist. The abolitionist has seen several faces. He knows many people, and to me, he seemed to help as much as he could without getting himself caught and in trouble. Which, I mean, was kind of crappily done, but to do what he was doing, I completely understand why. Part of it was he tells you, the women, how many kids they've given birth to and how many still remain alive, and it's honestly, it's sad. It's a terrible number. And just to think that they probably gave birth and then had to go right back out and work was a scary thought. In one instance, he talks about how a woman was asking the man, or asking the abolitionist to give up, like, not give up, sorry. The woman at one point was asking the abolitionist to lighten her son's work so he wouldn't have to suffer anymore. And her son, I think, said was age 6. Age 6. And he has such a heavy workload that he was dying. It makes me sick to my stomach to think that people did that and had no conscience about it. Felt no pain for making others bear it. It's disgusting. To me, it would definitely have to be the part where the woman came to her, or, sorry, him. Actually, I'm not sure. But anyway, came to this abolitionist in hopes for an extra piece of meat so she could feed her children. And she was very ill, and she put her own health up for her children, which, I mean, any good mother would do, but I don't know, it was really inspiring that they gave their last big chunk of meat to the slave so they could be fed and they could live on. The plantation owner, he disgusts me. And his diary entries, his is several single diary entries. And what his says is the first night, or morning, sorry, he wakes up, he reads 17 chapters in this, then he reads 200 chapters in Genesis, then he drinks his milk, dances his dance, does whatever, basically goes through the day, whips his 2 slaves for misbehavior. And that was February 1st, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have it pulled up. Then, several months later, actually, one of the slaves' name is Eugene. Eugene gets whipped for peeing the bed. Now, it never says how old Eugene is, but when you have a life such as Eugene and his brother or sister does, it's no wonder that they pee the bed. And Eugene's friend gets whipped also because Eugene peed the bed and then the slave hid it. The other one did, so Eugene wouldn't get whipped. And that was really brave of them. And when they do things like that, that makes me feel for them. Because, I mean, that slave, knowing that if they got caught would be beat also, still helped their friend, sibling, whatever, out. And it's kind of really inspirational because we don't even do that today. If someone was going to get beat or in trouble, grounded. If one of us kids was going to get grounded and, like, over something so stupid like, oh, your shoelace was undone, and my master found out that I had tied my friend's shoelace for her, or took another one, and then in return I would get whipped / beat / whatever, no one would tie that girl's shoe. No one would replace it. Anything. They would just keep walking and let them suffer. And back then, it's a man thing. And they think of everyone but themselves. The little slave girl thought of everyone else then before she pitied her. Eugene's other person is concealing stuff for them. And then the abolitionist in general is doing something completely illegal. Because if anyone were to find out that they were an abolitionist, turn around and would get, if I am correct, executed. Which is a scary thought. Actually, it does state twice that Eugene did wet the bed. The first time, they both got beat. The second time, they both got beat, and Eugene had to drink a pint. A pint, that's 2 cups of his own urine. Which absolutely disgusts me. If your child had a nightmare and peed the bed, would you make it drink a pint, 2 cups of pee just because? I think not. And again, the other slave got beat for concealing it, and that's truly inspirational. I definitely want them to realize how wrong it is to make someone live for you, slave for you. Because it happens today, even in abusive relationships, the abuse is completely and totally enslaved in this unrealistic, unrealistic dream world. You other world they see. And the person will beat them, you'll walk out of that door and you'll be ready to leave. And they'll come back and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, hun. I love you. Come back home." And you know what? They'll come back home. And when they do come back home, you know what happens? They get beat and they get threatened. "Don't ever leave again. Da da da." You've seen the Lifetime movies. It still happens today, and by reading these journals, I think we can all learn that it is not the way to live. I think we need to stop slavery once and for all. It's not as bad today, but it's still happening, and it needs to stop.